Hello and welcome to Evil's Comics. I'm Mike. I'm going to be doing a review today on Image Comics Sonata. It's done by their Shadowline Productions and Obnomaly Productions. It's written by David Hine, Brian Haberlin. Brian Haberlin also did the art, and the colorist is Geirrod Van Dyke. I literally had to look at this to make sure I got it, but sorry if I mispronounced that. It's a the genre I would say is like a sci-fi with a horror aesthetic, but really when you get down to it, it's kind of like this. It's got like this Romeo Juliet kind of vibe that comes later on in the story. It has a lot of what ifs. Mystery that keeps you involved in the story. I wouldn't say they end on exactly like cliffhangers or anything like that, but the story is enthralling enough to keep you wanting to go from issue to issue. I actually got this comic at a pickup at Half Price Bookstore, and I found the first 3 issues and they were all half off, so I was like, why not? I actually, going off the cover alone, I was like, yeah, and I opened up the book and I started, just looking at the art. And the art overall was pretty amazing, so I was like, hey, let's give it a try. Got home and read it, and the first 3 issues I was just blown away. And I literally rushed back to my Half Price to pick up the other issues, and they had issues 1 through 9. This comic does go through issues 1 through 12, and I think the 12th issue is a one-shot. I'm not sure if it's like a continuation of the story or it's somewhere before. I haven't found those other 3 issues yet, so this is just a review on those first 9 issues. Well, basically the story, it follows this concept where it's not Earth, it's somewhere far off in the galaxy, maybe a little bit in the future, and it's about one main planet, one big planet, and 2 other smaller planets that are around it. And these other 2 planets are occupied by these races called the Tayans and the Rands. And in the middle, you have this big planet called Perdita. And every like 5 years or so on, their planets come close enough with their early attempts of space travel, they can travel from their planet to the big planet. And the reason for doing so is kind of the same reason we have for space travel. They've depleted all their natural resources, so they go to this Perdita planet, they kind of do the same thing. They suck up some resources over there and they take it back to their planet. The story, even kind of how it sets up the story in the very beginning, is kind of like the Rands, and they're kind of like the main culture that you follow. But the Rands are sending like this this group of people to this culture, and there to meet her right at the beginning is Sonata. They're on Perdita. There's its own kind of like, I guess you would say, alien habitat, so it's got its own plant life and aliens. She rides around on this thermosaur, looks like a pterodactyl type of bird. There is a primitive race that lives on the planet. They're called Lumini, and they kind of go into the other aspect of the story. They do have some other little random animals that they run into, like right here on they run into these things called the Murkrats, and they look like evil and foreboding at first, but she kind of tells you, they're nothing. They're easily scared off. They're like scavengers. And then they kind of get to the main point when she's kind of explaining to these newbies to Perdita that, hey, there is one thing that you have to watch out for, and they have these kaiju, Godzilla-sized creatures that are roaming this planet, and they're called the Sleeping Giants. And they're featured on the cover. So basically it starts off, and it's kind of going into the explanation on a little more about the planet and the Sleeping Giants, and a little more into the Lumini. The Lumini, they're just a primitive race in the beginning, and they're shown, they're more alien looking but you know, I wouldn't really say they're. I mean, they're just they're really classified as a primitive race. Two of the other, you know, the Tayans and the Rands, they both kind of mention them as this primitive race, and that they're just a peaceful group of people. They have like shamans in their race, and she does have one of them as a best friend. His name is Mekron, but it goes into the story. Like basically, it goes kind of into the instructions about Perdita. They call it this god planet, where the sleeping giants roam. And after the explanation, it kind of jumps forward into the story, and you specifically follow Sonata's journey at that point. And it jumps into the story where the Rands have been living on Perdita for a little while. Sonata was born on the planet of Perdita, not Rand. And at this time, you know, I want to say she's 18, you know, but 20 something. And, you know, it basically shows her kind of exploring the planet on her thermosaur. It does have some brief conversations with their friend Mekron, and eventually it kind of leads into this thing where they're coming across like a they're basically missing water, and it's not just affecting the Rands, it's affecting this other primitive group called the Lumini. So they go investigate what's cutting off the water, and that's where the other race of people come into the picture, the Tayans. And the Tayans are a little more like mechanically inclined, sophisticated. So they basically have made this dam, and so they go and investigate the Tayans. Sonata's father in the beginning is hesitant about meeting the Tayans. He's explained that every time the Rands and Tayans have met, it's always ended in altercations. And sure enough, they do go meet, you know, the Tayans, and they kind of have like a president. I wouldn't say a king, but he's like the president of the Tayans, and we meet his son and some of his bodyguards. And you know, just like the father had you know said in the beginning, it doesn't go like all peaceful and everything. He basically tells them, we're not gonna, you know, the dam's gonna stay. If you come back, we're gonna kill you, and you know, and your primitive race of friend things. And that's basically the setup of the story. And by the end of the issue, you know, the Rands are like, no, we need the water. The Lumini, they need the water. The creatures living on the planet do. And so they do fly back, and they blow up the dam. And in doing so, it's Sonata, Mekron, her friend, the Lumini, and the son of the president of the Teos, and his name is Pow, and he becomes like the other main character. But they stumble across this hidden temple that was below the river in the first place, and they fell and ended up in the temple, and that leads us off into the first issue. I really loved this series. I mean, it just, the art, the story, the pacing, the character development, the lore that's behind it, they all did like an A+ job. I mean, if I had to give this comic a review just from the first 9 issues, I mean, it gets an A+ all the way through. I thought it was really going to get stale around the first, you know, 4 or 5 issues, but it doesn't. It keeps bringing you on, and it answers questions, and it keeps bringing new ones, you know, along the path. Eventually, it does go into the story where you do find out that this primitive race of people are not so primitive, that there is a hidden agenda where they're concerned, and it goes into the sleeping giants. And they stumble upon in this temple like technology that shouldn't exist. There's weapons and spacecraft that shouldn't exist. And at first, her friend Mekron, the Lumini, pretends like he doesn't know. And he kind of sticks with that. You kind of get this hint that he's something sinister from his end, and what it is he's the Lumini have made this pact with the sleeping giant, and they're like protectors of whatever the sleeping giants are, and all this weaponry and technology. The Lumini are like this advanced race, and they're there to protect the sleeping giants. Sonata ends up finding this bracelet as they're going through the temple, and she ends up putting it on. As she puts it on, somehow she activates like this portal, and you can kind of see it forming right there. And they do step through the portal. When they step through the portal, it like instantly, takes them to another portal. It's kind of like, it reminds me of a Stargate. But they basically travel like halfway across the other side of the planet. And this is a really huge planet. And at the time, the Tayans and the Rands, they didn't really even have this technology. They do mention that even by flying there, it takes like months and months and months because of the mass journey that it is. So all of a sudden, they're halfway across the planet. They end up running into this crazy guy that he's from one of the Rand's earlier expeditions. And then it starts off this whole like expedition part of the story where I'll show you the back cover, where it's like this rescue mission from both sides because she's supposed to be the president, the daughter of their kind of like a version of a king, and he's supposed to be like the son of the president of the Tayans. So that's kind of where I said it comes into this Romeo and Juliet, because it does in the future, it does get into this whole like love story where they do start falling in love, and and it's kind of like in the story it's more of a background thing. So if you're thinking it's this love story, it's really not. It's kind of in the background. It is something nice, I can say, that they did. It's not badly written in, even though they they showcase it on the cover. But really it's this whole mystery about what the Lumini were doing, what's the Sleeping Giants about, and that bracelet that she puts on with the portal, eventually it does give her powers, and they do kind of showcase some of that on the covers, but they kind of show her right here, at the bottom, and she's all like, highlighted in like this basking light. They do get into some like mythical magical stuff, or they do show the Sleeping Giant bringing one of them back from the dead. And the way the Sleeping Giant says, it's not really like he's bringing him back from the dead. The dead's just kind of like, another place. Like, and the Sleeping Giant somehow is able to just grab them from that other place and bring them back. As far as I am, the story, they haven't really like touched base on a lot of the Sleeping Giant part of it. It's more been on the Lumini, what they've been trying to hide, why they have this advanced technology. At one point of the story, they do go into where the Tayan race that we met in the beginning, they were kind of like just a scouting party. And you find out that there's really the civil war that's going back on their planet, and that really the Tayan president and everything, I think it seems more like he escaped Taya to, because they were maybe going to kill him in this rebellion. And they do show that the leaders of this rebellion, that they did win back on their planet, and now it's carrying over to Perdita, the god planet. So that's another aspect of the story, is now like all the people that are on Perdita, the Tayans, the Rands, the Lumini, they're kind of having a tag team up to go against the rebellion faction that's now on Perdita. In the process of them finding the temple, they did find all that alien advanced technology, and for both parties it was way advanced. So it's kind of another thing that they're fighting for. It's one of the reasons the Lumini have been protecting the Sleeping Giants, because that's just kind of the tip. Like I mentioned, the Sleeping Giants are able to bring people back from the dead. There are a couple scenes in the beginning that comes across as horror moments, and it's kind of like the Sleeping Giants running into people, and what happens when first off, they're kaiju size. So and in the beginning of the book, they're sleeping, so it's more like they're sleepwalking around. And it kind of shows what happens when they do wake up and they do come in contact with people, and it's more like, their conversation is so loud or intense, or it's like the word of God is just so immense, and it literally just melts our brains just from hearing a word from that language of these Sleeping Giants. So it's not really that they're a bad entity. They just like we have very few moments where they have had made contact. They do hint at with Sonata getting her powers, that she's able to contact with, she's able to talk with them on like a mental wavelength. This comic was just, overall, it was really well written. The art is amazing. I found it at half price. I have looked it up online, and it's something you can get really cheap. I think I saw the first 5 issues for like $5 on eBay. I picked this book to do one of my first reviews on because it's not a book that I've heard a lot of other people do. It's not a superhero book at all. This is, like I said, it's more sci-fi, love, and kind of a horror aspect. There's no scare. It's not scary. I keep saying horror, but that's just more the look of it. You know, like the sleeping giants. You know, they have a scary aesthetic to it. Another thing I want to touch on is this comic is great at an example. Comics, you do have to judge by its cover. And what I mean by that is they showcase a lot of covers in this series where they show Sonata wearing this costume or outfit or whatever you want to say it. And specifically right here with these wings. Now that's 1 issue. That's 2, and she's on this mech right here, you know, with the wings. They show her on another cover with the wings. They show her on another cover with the another cover with the wings. It's never featured in the comic at all. That costume, she never has those wings. I mean, they do show something obvious. She does fly around on that thermosaur, so she doesn't need the wings. The Tayans, like I said, they're more mechanical advanced, so it does have a steampunk aesthetic involved, but it's more for the Tayans. Like you'll see right here, they have like these weird blimps. They also have like these Da Vinci type gliders that they fly around that are kind of like steam powered. That's kind of the reason why they do end up tag teaming together to fight the Rebellion faction, because the Rebellion faction has a little more advanced as far as their ships. But I mean, really, I just want to bring this up and you know, because I had never seen anybody talk about it. It was a great find, a great pickup. It was really cheap. I mean, I ended up getting all 9 issues and they were all half off. But I brought this up as a conversation point. Do you have any comics that you know that not a lot of people talk about? You know, have you read this series? What do you know about it? You know, as far as I know, the last issue came out in August 2020, but I don't even know if they're continuing it, if it ended, I'm not sure. You know, spec-wise, if I had to say, this definitely is right up like HBO or Showtime or Amazon's avenue, Netflix. I mean, it's got a great story. The art is amazing. So, I mean, storyboards are right there. It's pretty simple story as far as, like, it's not really confusing or anything. It's not overly written. But this is just going to be my, you know, my review on Sonata. If you like this, go ahead and drop a like, add a subscribe if you're not subscribed. For those who are, thanks. My channel's going to grow. This is the first time I'm shooting on a brand new camera and microphone, and I'm trying different stuff. So, hashtag let's grow together.